The film begins on Christmas night, where everyone had decorated their homes. In one house, we see a man named Manal, who had come with his wife to his elder sister's house and was playing with his nephew. As it was getting late at night, he started telling a story to his nephew so that he could leave. After that, he bid farewell to his sister and left. When his wife was driving the car, Manal noticed that she didn't seem fine. So Manal asked, "What happened? Is there something wrong? Tell me." His wife said, "You know everything. I want a child." Manal replied, "I want one too, but not now. When the right time comes." His wife got angry and said, "You don't even want it." While this argument was happening, suddenly a car overtook them at high speed, causing their car to go out of control. His wife somehow managed to steady the car, but it had gone onto the wrong side of the road. Before she could bring the car back, a truck came and hit their car forcefully. The car flipped over and was completely destroyed. In this accident, Manal survived, but his wife died. Now, we see the time 1 year later, where Manal is living alone in a large house with his cat. From the news, he learns that a dangerous virus is spreading throughout the country, due to which borders could also be closed so that people stay where they are and do not get caught in the grip of the virus. Because whoever gets infected by this virus becomes extremely violent, full of anger, and excessively cruel, just like zombies, and starts biting others badly. But now this virus is somewhat under control, meaning infected people are no longer biting like zombies. This is the first variant of the virus. Now, news channels were discussing everywhere how this virus started, but Manal did not care about all of this. He was already deeply saddened by his wife's death, so he did not take any precautions. He took his car and went out to roam around the city. In many places, he saw written, "Welcome to the beginning of the end." Manal then reached the seaside because his wife had bought a boat, which he had come to sell. After meeting with a customer, when he was returning, he received a call from his sister, Belen, but Manal did not pick up the call. Then he went into a store where people were crazily buying food and drink supplies. Although the news was also saying to buy only essential items, people were scared that if a lockdown was imposed, they would not be able to leave their houses. So having essential supplies at home was important. After returning home, Manal called Belen. She told him, "My husband is in the army, so because of him, we are being sent to an island to be saved from the virus infection. There, we'll be given a house to live in, so come with us, brother. We are leaving tonight for the island." But Manal clearly refused. Belen insisted, "Brother, we need to stay together at this time, so please come with us. And yes, there are flights leaving for the island from the airport near you. Even if you come tomorrow, that's fine, but definitely come." Manal did not want to go, but because of his sister's insistence, he agreed. The next morning, he packed up, took his cat, and left for the airport. On the way, he saw several cars filled with people who were also heading to the airport to go to the island. Manal listened to the news on his way and learned that the virus's second variant had come the previous night. In this wave, the virus spreads through biting and coming in contact with infected blood. When Manal reached the airport, he stood in a long line for tickets because everyone wanted to go to the island. Just then, it was announced that the flights going to the island had been canceled. Hearing this, everyone got worried and started asking, "How will we go to the island now?" Then Belen called him again and said, "Brother, because of the second variant of the virus, the airport is being shut down. All flights have been canceled. Go back home and don't go outside. I'll keep you updated about what to do next." Suddenly, chaos erupted at the airport. Manal somehow took his cat and managed to come outside. He left for home in his car, but on the way, he saw long traffic jams. After waiting for many hours, when the traffic did not move, he left his car and started walking home with his cat. By the time he reached home, it was night. What he saw shocked him. Army personnel were standing outside his neighbor's house. They had built a plastic tunnel-like structure around the house and were forcibly dragging the neighbor out because he had become infected with the new virus variant. Manal returned home and fell asleep. The next morning, Belen called and said, "Brother, the situation is getting worse. I've heard that the government is creating safe zones to protect people and keep them quarantined. But inside news says that there is even more danger there. Obviously, with so many people staying together, the risk of infection increases. No matter what happens, don't leave the house, and definitely don't go to the safe zone. Manal watched the news and saw that borders were also being shut down. When he checked his phone, videos related to the virus were everywhere. The videos explained how to protect oneself from infected people and how the virus's second variant spreads through biting and infected blood. Seeing all of this, Manal became worried and thought, what is happening in this country? Suddenly, an emergency message came from the government stating that in a few hours, no one would be allowed to leave their homes and all markets would be shut down. Manal rushed to a store to buy food, but by then, the store had already been emptied. People had taken everything. Even the few things Manal tried to grab were snatched from him. Somehow, he managed to collect a few items, put them in his bag, and left the store. After coming out of the store, Manal saw an infected person attacking a police officer. Manal picked up a rod and came outside to save the police officer, but the infected person's attention shifted towards Manal, and it started running toward him. Manal tried to defend himself, but just then, the infected person was shot dead by the police officer, who had fired the bullet. Manal moved forward to help the officer, but the officer, who had been bitten, told Manal to stay away from him. After Manal left, the officer shot himself so that he wouldn't harm others. After returning home, Manal started securing his house. He put extra locks on the doors, added rods, and placed thick chains to ensure no one could break in. By evening, the network also went down. At night, Army personnel came to their area with buses to take people to the safe zone. They were making announcements asking everyone to board the buses. Manal turned off his lights and hid in his house so that they wouldn't take him along. Now we see 2 weeks later. The entire area had become completely empty, and Manal was the only person left. He recorded a video for his sister, saying, "I'm absolutely fine here, but the problem is that I'm running out of food." When he tried to send the video, it didn't go through because the network was still not working. He thought to himself, even if I don't die from the infection, I'll definitely die of hunger. Determined to find food, Manal took his weapons and went out in search. He checked many houses, but he couldn't find anything to eat. He had walked far from his house. While searching, he entered a house where he saw an old woman sitting in a wheelchair. Her legs weren't working. Manal thought there might be food here, but there was nothing. The old woman told him, "I've kept an eye on a few houses nearby. Go check them. You might find something there." Following her suggestion, Manal went to those houses and found some food. He brought it back, and both of them ate to satisfy their hunger. However, the old woman said to him, "This can't go on forever. You should have gone with the army. If we don't have any food left, we'll end up killing each other to survive." Manal replied, "We shouldn't lose hope. I'll go and find more food." The next time Manal went out, he found a house where there was a lot of food. He brought it back to the old woman's house. That night, they both ate happily, feeling a little relief. While talking, Manal told the old woman about his wife and said, "It's good that she died. Look at what we're seeing now. We don't even have food to eat." After talking for a while, Manal returned to his own house. The next morning, Manal heard the old woman's voice on the walkie-talkie. She said, "Quickly turn on the radio." When Manal turned on the radio, government officials were announcing, "Anyone who is still alive should come to the safe zone. We will take you to the island for safety." Hearing this, the old woman told him, "I don't think this is right. The infection will spread quickly in crowds." Manal replied, "We don't have food. We'll have to go there." The old woman said, "I'm in a wheelchair. I can't go anywhere." Manal assured her, "That's my job. I'll help you reach there." The next morning, Manal packed all his belongings and went to the old woman's house. But what he saw broke him completely. The old woman had died. She had taken too many pills to end her own life. Beside her, she had left a letter that read, "Thank you for taking care of me for so long. I couldn't burden you anymore, so I took this step. Now you should continue alone." Manal, feeling deeply saddened, picked up his belongings and left. While walking, an infected woman suddenly attacked him. He pushed her away and shot her to save himself. Although he killed her, it made him feel terrible. Later, he recorded another video for Belen, saying, "The infected people are now everywhere in the streets. I can't wait any longer for you to come and take me with you. I'm coming to you myself." Manal decided to head towards the safe zone, but because the roads were blocked, he chose to go through the forest. Along the way, many infected people chased after him, but he didn't stop. Finally, he reached the safe zone. What he saw there shocked him. There were dead bodies everywhere, and the entire area was filled with infected people. As he tried to make his way through, his bike hit a corpse and flipped over. The box containing his cat also fell, but he picked it up and continued walking. The infected were still chasing him. Manal ran and took shelter in a building, where he shut the door behind him. The infected began banging their heads against the door to get in. Manal escaped through the back exit and saw a small ship nearby. He hurried toward it and climbed aboard. Inside the ship, he found blood everywhere. He heard faint sounds coming from a cabin. When he opened the door, he saw a small baby who had been infected. The baby looked terrifying with bloodshot eyes. Manal thought to himself, if this were an adult, I could kill them. But how can I kill a baby? Unable to bring himself to do it, he left the ship and took a smaller lifeboat instead. While sailing, Manal recorded another message for Belen. Sister, you are right about not going to the safe zone. It's terrible there. Most people are either dead or infected. As he continued his journey, he saw infected bodies floating in the water. Suddenly, he noticed a ship approaching him. He signaled to stop them, and the people aboard allowed him to climb up. After boarding the ship, Manal was given food and water. On the ship, he met 3 people: the captain, a pilot, and the captain's assistant. The pilot gave him a cabin to rest. While sitting alone, Manal asked the pilot, "Am I the only survivor you found?" The pilot replied, "Yes, you're the first one." Later, while looking outside the window, Manal saw a family approaching the ship for help. The next morning, he asked the pilot, "What happened to the family that came last night?" The pilot replied, "What family? No one came here last night." Hearing this, Manal became suspicious and began observing everything closely. Manal confronted the pilot again and said, "That family was taken to the basement, right?" The pilot snapped back, "Stop thinking too much. Mind your own business and forget about it." This response made Manal even more suspicious. That night, Manal decided to investigate. He quietly made his way to the basement and found the family tied up with their mouths covered. They looked helpless. The family asked him, "Where is our woman and child? What happened to them?" Manal replied, "I don't know." Just then, the captain's assistant arrived and pointed a gun at Manal. Before the assistant could shoot, the pilot arrived and strangled the assistant to death with a rope. The pilot angrily told Manal, "I warned you to stay out of this." The pilot and Manal then decided to escape. They untied the family and took a small boat to leave the ship. However, the captain's men noticed them and started shooting at them. In the chaos, one of the family members was shot dead, and the pilot was badly injured. Manal managed to escape with the pilot and brought him to a nearby hospital, hoping to find help. The hospital was deserted, filled with blood and the remains of chaos. Manal laid the pilot on a bed, and the pilot asked him to remove the bullet from his wound. Manal hesitated and said, "I've never done this before," but the pilot insisted, and Manal had no choice. With trembling hands, Manal removed the bullet. Afterward, when Manal went to find medical supplies, an infected person attacked him. He barely managed to kill the infected and escape. However, the sound of gunfire attracted more infected to the hospital. As the infected swarmed the building, a nurse appeared and saved Manal. She led him to a secure area where a doctor and 3 children were hiding. The nurse treated the pilot and told Manal, "The pilot will recover soon." "I removed the bullet." Manal asked the nurse, "Is there a helicopter here? We need to leave." The nurse replied, "Yes, there's a helicopter, but it's surrounded by infected people. It's too dangerous to reach." That night, Manal visited the spot where his wife had died. With tears in his eyes, he whispered, "Please forgive me. I didn't listen to you. I thought we had time, but you left me too soon." The next day, Manal made a plan to reach the helicopter. He noticed several wheeled barricades in the hospital and connected them to form a protective circle. The group, Manal, the nurse, the pilot, and the children, began moving toward the helicopter inside the barricades. As they moved, one of the barricades got stuck. While they were trying to free it, the barricades clashed loudly, attracting a massive horde of infected. The infected began climbing over the barricades. Manal and the nurse fought back with axes, but there were too many infected. The nurse grabbed the children and ran toward the helicopter. The pilot, who had recovered enough, also joined them. Manal continued fighting alone, but eventually made it to the helicopter as well. Just as they boarded, the helicopter refused to start. Meanwhile, The infected began swarming the area, and some climbed onto the helicopter. Manal grabbed an axe and fought them off desperately. The noise also attracted a group of armed thugs, who entered the area and began shooting both the infected and the survivors. Seeing this, Manal and the pilot exchanged a look and silently devised a plan. Manal smashed open a gate, letting the infected flood the area. The thugs, now busy fighting the infected, gave Manal and the pilot enough time. Suddenly, the helicopter started. The nurse threw down a ladder for Manal, who climbed up just in time as the helicopter took off. As they flew, Manal called Belen and said with joy, "Sister, I did it. I'm coming to the island." But Belen's voice turned serious. She said, "Brother, turn back immediately. The infected have reached the island too. This place is no longer safe." The call disconnected, and Manal looked ahead in shock as the helicopter descended toward the island. Below, the ground was swarming with infected people. Manal realized that the fight for survival was far from over. The film ends here.